I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, episode number 35. This podcast is for attorneys who are running their own firms. We explore tactics, tools, and stories related to pushing past simply lawyering well and into building a successful firm. Working in your firm and working on your business are two very different things. This podcast focuses on the latter. Welcome to this week's episode of the Velocity Work Podcast. I am excited to bring you a conversation with Erik Pickering. He is the president of Tracers. If you don't know what Tracers is, they provide investigative data solutions to law firms. So they do research. It's pretty extensive, and the technology is impressive. Also, the company, to me, is impressive, not only just from talking to Erik, but, when I look through their site, they care so deeply about the customer relationship, which is unique. A lot of people say they do, but you can feel that they go the extra mile. So it was a privilege to talk to him. It was also such a privilege to talk to him because of his background. He has his undergrad is in mechanical engineering from the University of Washington. He has an MBA from Harvard. He has worked for some huge notable corporations. Procter & Gamble, I think, is where he started. That's what he mentions in the interview. He had a great experience there. Booz Allen Hamilton, Amazon.com, Bridgewater, which I loved talking to him about his time at Bridgewater. He touched on, that's Ray Dalio runs Bridgewater Associates. It's a hedge fund. And it was so cool to hear him talk about how closely he worked with Ray Dalio and the principles that Ray Dalio has now written a book about and has an app for. This is what Erik was forced to implement at his time there, which he came to appreciate at some point on his journey. And it's really cool to hear him talk about his experience. His background, his experience. He's essentially been running and growing businesses for over 25 years. They've been businesses within the business. Now, about 3 years ago, he took over Tracers. And so he's bringing all of that experience to his, as an entrepreneur now. And he opens up about what that's been like, and specifically what that's been like in this COVID phase. And how he is thinking about the business during this time, how he's thinking about his team, how he's thinking about the future. So we dig into that a little bit, and I think you guys will enjoy the conversation, and really his perspective is valuable, and I think you will pick up on that quite quickly. Enjoy the interview. Okay, welcome, Erik Pickering. I am very excited to have you on the podcast. I've heard so many good things about you. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Appreciate you having me.
I am, to all the listeners, I'm really excited to have this conversation today with Erik because I think there's a lot of wisdom to be imparted. And I have the sense already, just from the little bit of time that we spent before we pushed record, that he's pretty humble, but I think he's pretty accomplished as well. And he runs an organization called Tracers that I really want him to share more with all of you about, because the more dialed in and efficient you can be with getting the job done that you need to get done, I think is the right move. And I have a hunch that Tracers is a huge helping hand in that. So Erik, first, let me just say, the main thing I know about you, and that I think is the most exciting, is that when I read about you, you have about 25 years of running and growing businesses under your belt. Like, that's something that you're very familiar with. And you've had a lot of different work experience before even Tracers that would showcase that. And then now you're with Tracers. And so I was wondering if you would back up and sort of tell us who you are and where you've been to the point, like what got you to the point you are now. And then I'll ask you some questions about Tracers.
Yeah, you bet. Tracers is actually relatively new in that it's been about 3 years since I took over running Tracers. And before that, the I've not been an entrepreneurial. I've been like running businesses within larger corporations. So the nice part about that is, you get to see, Procter and Gamble is where I started, and I think it's one of the best run companies in the world from a management perspective. So I spent years there. I spent time at Amazon, Booz Allen. The last part was at Bridgewater Associates, the hedge fund, with the principals, if you've seen those. So it's all about excellent leadership. And then 3 years ago, when I left Bridgewater, I've always wanted to do something purely entrepreneurial. I've run businesses, like I said, underneath a holding company. So I was essentially autonomous, but it's still very different than being truly an entrepreneur. So I'm 3 years into that. And so I feel like I can relate to your listeners very, very viscerally about the stresses, the fun and the pain of being an entrepreneur, and then bringing to bear, some of the frameworks and tools that I've learned over the years has been helpful, and I'm excited to whatever degree that's helpful to share those with folks. Yeah.
Okay, great. That is excellent. You mentioned Principles. Did you read the book by Ray Dalio?
Well, I was there for 7 years, and I worked directly for Ray and with Ray. So he actually had his first draft of them when I started, and I'm sort of scared and curious at the same time to see if I'm actually in the book somewhere about some mistake I made and what we learned from it. So
that's great.
Yeah, so I actually haven't read the official book, but I definitely live them.
Oh, that is wild. That is, I didn't know that you worked I knew you worked at Bridgewater. I didn't know you worked so closely with him.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wild. I actually downloaded the app Principles to my phone, and I haven't messed around with it too much, but from what I understand, there's really pretty incredible search functionality in there that if you're experiencing an issue, it'll pull up a bunch of the principles that apply to the issue. So anyway,
I have the app also. I mean, so it's, I mean, and the thing, that is the core, sort of his 5-step approach to life, is what I'm doing right now with Tracers. I mean, so I'll be honest, it took me at 5 of the 7 years to finally come to like, all right, I'm on board with this, because it's delivered in a very draconian, heavy-handed way there that you have to do it this way or there's no other way. And it chafed me for about 5 years. and then I finally was like, you know what, I actually believe these. And I use them in my family. I try to talk to my kids about them, and it's just a great way to live your life, really.
That is awesome. Why do you think, I know what you're talking about when you experience a set of principles that you are supposed to abide by and you feel resistance to? Why do you think that it feels like human nature to have resistance to such a system or resistance to such a way of thinking? And then eventually it's like, okay, well, what if I just did it? And it turns out that it works. What do you think that is?
Yeah, I wonder if it's sort of like a free will thing, meaning like if they were put out there and said, what do you think? Give them a try, take them or leave them. And, in this case, it was literally, here's a new principle and here's an iPad and you have to do, record a dot 20 times a day, or you're in trouble, so it was very, just like, it was very extreme in that sense. So it is interesting. I had that conversation with him a couple times. It's like, you can't force it, but that's the whole, it was an example of the principles at work, meaning like, if you think it's bad, then just speak up and, and we'll change it, so he felt like it was being delivered in that sense. And then I think most recipients felt like this was just do it this way or the highway.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, okay, let's talk about Tracers. You took it over 3 years ago. Do you mind sharing? Because I saw the company's been founded since 1996.
Yeah.
Has it dramatically changed over the years? They've really done the same thing since 1996.
Yeah. So it has changed. Yeah. So it's been around for a long time, and And the original founder, who was there, for 20 years, was really just a data sort of guru. Like that was his thing. He even 20 years ago created tools so that you can go out and begin pulling public records in where they're available and automatically scraping them, which was totally new 25 years ago. So it was this rich database that the primary focus for the first couple decades was law enforcement and helping them solve crimes and private or professional investigators who for insurance companies need to go investigate claims. So that's sort of the roots of Tracers. And then when I took over, it's been a pretty radical shift because really it was run before as a very typical entrepreneurial company. It was bootstrapped. It was, I would say, wildly successful beyond his expectations of where he thought he would be, and so it really had gotten to a point where it was just whoever found us. I don't know how they would find the company. Frankly, there was no marketing. There was no professional team really in place. He sort of ran it. He knew every part of it. Again, a very typical sort of entrepreneurial story. And then when I took over, I really, the assets that were there was this amazing historical database that is unique, and that's what the company's known for. Is it's great data and it's great customer service. So there's 10,000 customers that it really is. We call it the Tracers family. Like the customer service is amazing. You call, somebody answers the phone. We'll stay on the phone with you until your problem's solved. It's almost, I think, old school to describe it the way it used to be. So that was the great assets. And then when I went in, I just said, I just came in with fresh eyes and said, where can we go with these assets? Because the nature of public and private records, and we have essentially all the information on adults in the U.S. And we had besides law enforcement, there's background employment screeners used us, collection companies who need to find people used us, lawyers used us. So we had basically there's probably 10 verticals that are all of them huge: finance, fraud, risk. And we just went in and did an assessment and said, all right, all of these are great. Which of these opportunities are the best in terms of from a market perspective, and then our offering. Just did that overlay of what do we think the best, 1, 2, or 3 priorities are, so we could focus. And then basically went in and invested in infrastructure, data, product, services, front end, back end, marketing, the brand, the entire thing, and then relaunched with the focus being attorneys and employment screening is another one. But really, attorneys is the lion's share of our focus is about serving the attorney market. It's the nature of sort of the dynamics that the market dynamics of research, legal research, and then public data research. Those two combined have been separated because a lot of the legal tech companies that have started, like Case Text and Ross, that are doing the legal research, that's basically driven the ability to get away from the bundle that the huge guy, the Lexuses and Westlaw's would have these bundles, and you just like take it or leave it. And that the creation of these it's a toolkit. You take the tools you want as opposed to have to buy the kit has made created a huge opportunity for Tracers. And we've got attorneys that have been on our site for 20 years. So we have the product, we know it serves them well, and we've never, ever marketed or done a single trade show that had anything to do with attorneys. So it's just word of mouth. And now we're taking that and really just trying to figure out the best way. Our approach is really how can we help attorneys, because there's a huge educational component that we can help their businesses be more efficient and have better cases. Basically, and help them thrive. And it's really just explaining, like, this is what the tool can do for you. And once we make that connection and are able to do a demo and show that it basically is it's a done deal. But it's attorneys have a lot of people coming at them, as and so it's really about connecting in a way that we can help them run their businesses better.
So, okay, that's fantastic. I'd love if you're game, I'd love for you to dig into that more. Like maybe offer a little bit of education for listeners that don't know about tracers. How why should they use tracers?
Yeah, you bet. So the basically, um, just to frame it again as data can make or break a case. Like one piece of data, if you get the right piece or you're missing the right piece, it can really make or break your case. So it's and attorneys, we've talked to law professors, that want to work with us to basically educate law students before they get out in the world that you need a tool, a professional investigative data tool like a tracers to go alongside your legal research, because it's to go out and try to find do your own research, say on the web. It's free, but it's at sort of best case it's time consuming, and worst case it's inaccurate. And really what tracers brings is an efficient way to go in and find there's sort of four categories of what attorneys need tracers for. It's finding witnesses or persons of interest. So just, super straightforward, but critical is finding people, whether you're a process server in that part of the world, but finding the right people so that you can get them involved and get what you need from them. Doing like due diligence and finding out background information about people on both sides of the case, and then finding out about assets and businesses is a huge part of many practices. And then the fourth one is sort of a general, we call it a digital footprint. So social media is such a huge component of everyone's lives now. We enable like a one-stop shop that pulls in all of that into one place. So basically, those are the four types of sort of research that's needed, and then just to bring it to like connecting. So what does that mean from a case? So like I said, from a people search perspective, if you're in a probate case and you're trying to find a estranged son who hasn't been seen for 20 years, that's pretty easy. I mean, that may be slightly exaggerating, but it's pretty easy with Tracers, which is an online platform. So you sign up and you get your login, and you come to Tracers, you log in, and then you basically can do your own searches. So you can, instead of hiring a private investigator to go find somebody, those private investigators use our system. So you can just go in, do it yourself. You can do a trace of here's where he was, here's where that son is now, and here's a phone number. You call them. Like I mentioned before, the collections, if you're a collections attorney, like having the right party contact is what that industry calls it. But being able to find people in collections is obviously huge. A couple of the second part around due diligence, I think any attorney largely can relate to the thing. You do not want surprises in the courtroom. So for both sides, like your own clients, client can say, no, I don't have any alcohol related crimes. And then you can, in a second, pull up, here's my client. There's 2 DUIs from 10 years ago. And they ask them, well, I thought those went away after 5 years. So instead of that coming out in the courtroom, you have the full picture so you don't get surprised. And then, similarly, you can do, like, as an example, for both sides of a case, you can put monitoring and know instantly if anyone gets arrested for anything. Basically, in the U.S., you can get a real-time alert. So in the middle of a case, somebody on one side or the other gets arrested, you'll know before anyone else does, and can either be prepared for that question or ask that question. And then the third part, sorry if I'm rambling, but let me give you 2 more. So then the third part was locating assets and business information. So in family law, the asset component is obviously critical in terms of if it's a contested divorce, being able to find, the example is like a hunting cabin that, wasn't disclosed or whatever, airplanes or boats that aren't, when people are trying to hide things, you can basically see all of that because there's public records that is searched and brought to you. You can also get the similar sort of diligence on a business. So who are the principals on the business? Are there tax liens? Are there judgments against the business? And the same flavor for a person. So if you're in a civil personal injury case, you can see the person's background and, hey, this person's already got 7 judgments against them. It's really no point in moving forward with that case. There's a line up on that person already that there just really isn't going to make any sense for you. And then I always tend to rush through those ones because I love the social media, because it's just, there's so many examples of the amazing information that people will post on themselves. And the problem with this one is, and I think it's an easily understandable one. There's so many, there's the major ones, Facebook and LinkedIn, and, but there's also, 10 other sort of smaller one-off places that people can have profiles. And basically what we do is we just go out, and that is all done sort of within seconds. We go out and search all of those sites and the millions of pages and posts and pull them all together, and you can come back with proof of an alibi. Here's somebody a picture was posted of them at the same time they're supposed to be committing a crime, or custody disputes. Here's somebody who's happily posting themselves doing drugs when they're in the middle of a custody suit. You want the kids to end up in the right place, in a safe place. Same thing with the final one is the personal injury claim with the bungee jumping person who's going to settle their back injury, or the other side of that case where it just shows that, somebody takes risks a lot. So those are some quick examples. But it's even one of the, like I said, even one of those things that you miss can really, it's about having the strongest case you can, and then doing that super efficiently so that you can take on more cases and bill more hours and, enable the whole firm to thrive.
I love this because I don't get into very often with my clients, unless we're talking about how to streamline a process. I don't get into the lawyering side of things, the technician side of things. Yeah. I'm more focused with them on vision and growth for the business. And, but I'm always encouraging and pushing them to look at what they currently have going on inside the firm to figure out where they can be more efficient, where they can free up some of their time to do more important, create results in different ways. So I am fascinated by, you're the first person I've had on the podcast that delves into the lawyering side of things. Usually it's more the business side of things. So I love this. And I will also say on top of that, I'm blown away that, this technology exists, which I guess I could have guessed that this technology exists, but what do people do without tracers? Like, this sounds like a ton of work if you don't have tracers.
Well, it's hard to get an exact stat but I'd say it's like half, meaning like half of the small solos out there do not have a professional investigative data tool. And it's because what you just said, it's not intuitively obvious. Nobody taught them about it in law school. And, so I go to Google and I Google people, and I can go to the court's sites and I can search on the court site. So, there's two parts of what we do. There's a huge component, which is public records, and they're called public records because you can go as a public person and go to a courthouse and search all those records. It takes a long time and is incredibly inefficient, and some of them aren't available, so we make that part easier. And then there's another piece, which is private records, which you as a public, just general person can't access, but because you're an attorney and you have a client and you're of a business, you're enabled even with additional records that aren't available in the public. But people, it's not, it's just like, that goes back to the educational part. People just don't know. And when you show them this, their eyes just like light up, and it's so there's one bucket, which is they just don't know. And then there's sort of a middle bucket, which is I do a little bit, but I really don't understand the power of it. And then there's a third bucket, which is I get it all, and now I'm trying to optimize and integrate through my platform and, really be a data-driven firm. But there's three, there's sort of three flavors, and it's, but the probably one of the biggest is just a lack of understanding of what the tools that are out there that they can use.
Yeah. If you hear me clicking around, I saw something on your site I was going to ask you specifically about, it just seems like uber convenient. Basically you integrate with legal software. Is that correct?
That's right.
Tracer.
Yeah.
And, is it more than you can name, or is it enough that you can name who you integrate with currently?
Well, we are, I would say, 6 months into our journey, and we have been received with such open arms. It's largely a resource constraint in terms of how quickly we can integrate with people, because the ones that we've integrated, so Clio, for example, is we're integrated single sign-on. You're in a matter, you want to do a search, you click through, you do the search of tracers, lands with this is the case matter I'm on, and it tags it as such. And then there's another half dozen of case text, case maker, reign in court that are we are integrated together on our sites so that it's easy. Again, when you're doing your research, there's several in the works that are going to be even sort of a deeper integration that enables people to like, hey, everything I need for my case is in this one site. And that way I'm not going back and forth. But we're just beginning that journey, and it's and it's just a win-win, because that there's a huge part of the education that, okay, well, I'm on my trusted platform. Platforms tend to be, as long as you're attached to something, so it doesn't feel like another new thing, it helps attorneys get comfortable with, okay, I can plug this thing, because it's not, again, they get just peppered with, here's 50 things you should be doing, and it's overwhelming. So it's a vehicle for also people to get comfortable with, here's a tool I need, it's already attached, I plug it in. So yeah, that's
cool.
been a big win. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Is there any reason why a firm wouldn't use you guys yet? Is there, and I know you're biased because this is your company, but I don't know, is there a reason? I'm thinking too, is this cost prohibitive, or is it reasonable because of how much time it saves? Just looking at it from their perspective, what would be the reasons that they would be hesitant once they learn?
Yeah, well, I think, so the way we stack up against the competition, I love our competition, because they're the biggies I named before, and they've gotten so big you can't help but become bureaucratic. So they don't have customer service. They're very draconian on here's the plan, take it or leave it. We're not going to do anything for you. So we win on the customer service, the data, and the offering is broader, because we've been in the business for 25 years and brought in all these data products. And then we're, on the margin, we also save people money versus going that route. So it's pretty compelling. But if you're a solo and you do one case a month, and when you're done with that case, you go pick the next one, and then so there is we have a plan that basically is a sort of pay as you go for that person. I still think it makes sense to have the tool, and so we basically have tiers of pricing that if you're like that person, you can get a pay as you go. Most people, if you have a thriving practice like you describe your customer base, there's sort of unlimited plan that you can not have to worry about, I'm going to run up $1,000, $3,000 a month bill, because you basically can use it as much as you want, because you really should. I mean, every case that comes across your docket, you should be doing that diligence and that background report. So, I don't think there's much of a segment that shouldn't have some tool. And again, whether it's our tool or somebody else's tool, if you are running a business, you should have a professional investigative data tool and not be using the internet. That's just the bottom.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. That's great. And I didn't expect you to have something that would be a reason that they wouldn't sign up with you. I was just curious if it made more sense for some than others. And it's interesting you point out, if you're I think about people who listen to this podcast, if they do just have that one case a month, they're just getting started. It's not what they would choose. They want to grow.
Right.
And essentially you want to grow. If you're growth minded, this tool probably makes sense for you.
That's right.
Okay. That's great. That's really great. You can dip back in anytime you want, because I think tracers is something people should really look into and be using. So we can dip back in anytime you want to tracer specifically. I would love to talk to you though, especially with your background and your experience, this phase that we're in with COVID and the lockdown that's happened and what's going on with the economy. And we're all just kind of watching. Some people are panicking. Some aren't, to my surprise. I can say more about that too. But I'm curious how you, with your leadership background and experience, what you're doing inside of your company and how you're thinking about this phase. And I can come up with really specific questions, but I kind of just want to hear what you have to say, period, about the phase that we're in, how you're thinking about it, and start there, if that's okay with you.
Yeah. So so I love talking about it because I think we are in unprecedented times, and I think helping people not panic is probably the best thing that you can do for people, because if you get into that mode, you're sort of doomed. So, and I mentioned it when we were talking about sort of the Bridgewater thing, but the way I'm approaching it is that 5-step process. Pick your goal, come up with a plan, have people poke holes in it, do it, and then see what happens and iterate on it, basically. So it's super simple on one hand, but then to go into those, I'll just elaborate a little bit, and there's some of the helpful things that I've been doing. And again, just to reiterate, I am literally doing this with my company, and it's hard. It's hard because there's really hard choices, and it sucks, to be quite honest. Right. But this is so helpful for me to just get out of the emotions and get into like, here's why I'm doing this, and this is why it's going to help the company and help the employees. So, the picking your goal is, it doesn't have to be just to survive. It could be thrive. It could be I am a bankruptcy attorney, and I know, like in 2008, bankruptcy filings tripled in the following 18 months. So again, that's a bad thing because from a larger economic perspective, but from a bankruptcy attorney, there is a huge wave of business coming your way. So it might be to thrive and prepare for that and get ready. I think most people are more in the survive part of, how do I make sure I get through this? And for tracers, we think of it as our primary goal is to take care of our people. And then to do that, we need to make sure we survive and then are prepared and sort of set the table to thrive through this. And when we come out and the country comes out of this as a whole. So that's the goal. Your listeners, as the owners of their firm, really have to set that, and it's going to force certain decisions paths down the road. But being crystal clear on that and sharing that is step one. And then the meat on the bone here is, what's your plan, obviously. So coming up with a plan to achieve that is the best antidote to the stress and anxiety that you have. Because if you have a plan and you're executing it, that you basically take control of your own destiny in that sense. So I think that's the most, like I said, the most helpful part of this. And the planning portion, again for your listener base, which have established firms and employees, I've really never used the phrase hope for the best and plan for the worst. Maybe it's because we've lived in such good times, largely, except for 10 years ago. But this is the best example of, I think you have to do that in this point in time. And to do that, you really need to get a firm grasp on the details of your business. So that is, what is your revenues? That's usually not that hard. Understanding how they have already been affected and where you think where they're directionally going is a little trickier, but not that hard. And then expenses and really understanding what's required. So there's a lot of work to understanding this precise, like, these are the things that drive the business. These are things that aren't. But subtracting those two gives you your burn rate, and then you know how much cash you have. That's usually pretty easy. And you can say like, hey, look, I'm looking at 8 months, or I'm looking at 8 days. Can be very radically different on where you stand on those things, but you have to get your arms wrapped around what does this mean, and then to do that survival part of it, you need to. Again, I think this. Some people say this is going to last 10 weeks. Some say 10 months. I'm more like 10 months. So if you say it's going to be 10 months, then you need to manage those numbers. Revenue in this part, for the most, is out of your control, meaning like businesses are locked up and not making decisions. And, as we know, the economy is sort of shutting down, but the expenses run rate, that's largely in your control. And, this is the part that, we went and Tracers went through. I mean, it's almost comic to some degree that I went through every single expense, because everything adds up, and you really stare at that. And I did that first before looking at people, because we have a lot of people, and we did have to do some layoffs. But as I look at our goal, if the whole company goes under, you haven't done anything for any of the employees. So that's how I have to continually reframe it for myself, because it feels awful, because everyone's, to sort of put people out that we know we're good and we want to hire them back, but you have to make choices like that in a non-emotional way to be able to get out the other side. So there's a huge portion that is definitely not for this talk, because it would take a long time, but all of the things going on with the government support, I think, are great, and everyone of your users should be maximizing all of those things. But I won't go into the details of those, but that's a huge part of that formula. So that's
I
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I love that you said, I didn't expect you to say it, but I love that you said something I really try to drive home for people is you have to know your data. You have to know your numbers and get your house in order. And I don't even mean get your house in order, meaning be healthy. Just know exactly what's going on behind the curtain. And I think it's tough for people like attorneys, because they essentially have 2 full-time jobs when they build their firm. They need to be lawyering and they need to be running the business. And oftentimes it's easier to really allow yourself to fall into the lawyering piece, because it's what brings in the business, and you got to do it. You kind of got to hustle to get things off the ground, and it's easy to get stuck there and not ever really have a firm grasp on the firm and how it's doing. You just don't know your numbers.
Right.
Like I talk to many owners who say like, oh yeah, we're good. I know we can make payroll. Like sometimes I wonder exactly how close it is, but we can make payroll. And that to me is a sign that they don't really know what's under the hood. And I think this phase is really pushing people into getting they're getting a firm grasp on exactly the reality of what their business is and what the numbers are. So I love that you just said that, because it's an easy time with panic to just keep your head in the sand, not on purpose. No one's intentionally doing that, but to focus on the wrong things. And getting back to the basics feels so important. So I love that you just said, get a firm grasp. I wrote that down. Get a firm grasp. Really understand what your expenses are. So many people don't, and that's normal, and that can happen. But this is a really good time to get a handle on that.
Yeah, that's right. And it's and it is essentially the bedrock of then how you're making your choices to achieve that primary goal of. So it's again, it sort of just gets to the logical as opposed to the emotional side of the brain. If you can look at that and say, these are the levers I have, and without that, it just becomes even harder. So I totally agree.
Without that, whatever plan you put in place is like a house of cards.
That's right.
It's not, because you don't really know that plan is going to make it.
Yeah, that's right. So
So I didn't mean to cut
Yeah,
you
no,
off
no.
there. So,
Please cut
so
me
the
off
plan.
anytime you want. So that, so the second part of tracers that, we have, I largely have achieved or finished sort of the first round of, okay, I feel like we're in a place where we can go for months, and we've done what I just described. And now I'm really turning towards, okay, what can we do to thrive both immediately and then as we come out of this? So the the coming out of it, one key part of it is you have to, when you come up with that plan I just talked about, you have to leave yourself enough cash at the end of this to be able to start your business back up at full speed. Because a lot of people also will, if you don't do that and you think, oh, I'm just going to try to milk it down to zero, well, then you can't start your business. So you have to leave enough buffer in there that, you're ready to go and take advantage of, because there are going to be opportunities on the other side of this that are that you'll want to take advantage of. And then, but then that's less fun than the thing that I really like spending time on, because it just buoys my spirits, is like, what can we do like right now? So from an attorney perspective, this is because this is such an unprecedented time, there really is a massive need for advice, business and personal, all kinds of advice that attorneys can help with. So, I mean, the advice that what we're doing, and I think what your customer or what your clients can do, is think about ways that you can pivot to those growth areas. So by and large, attorneys are marginally counter-cyclical. So that when a recession hits, there's more bankruptcies, there's more crime, so it's not like those are good things, but they're good things from a legal perspective, from a business perspective, because they tend to grow. And then if you look at this specific instance, I already talked about bankruptcies, but there is an unusual spike of custody need, because this quarantine, people are breaking their custody rules, and there is just a massive spike in custody understanding. What are the questions? How can I handle this? Make sure I'm doing it right, or is the other person doing it right? This sort of huge new laws that have been put in place to protect people, which are great. People need help understanding, hey, am I doing the right things? So, because I can't pay, but I don't want to be evicted. I know there's a law, I don't understand it. What are the right things I can do to communicate? Here's why I'm doing it. So I'm, protecting myself when we come out of this. And then, so there's lots of targeted sort of explosive growth that's happening right now. And as your clients can look and say, hey, I'm going to pick something that's adjacent to what I'm doing. So if I'm a car maker, maybe I'll make motorcycles. I'm not going to go switch to making candy bars. So if I'm a family law, what's a segment that I can pivot to, and then pivot in a way that, I spoke before we started about this, having the first thing that I'm reaching out to people be totally related to the situation that we're in. Because if you aren't relating it to this craziness that we're in, it's just noise. Nobody's listening to it, because no one can think about it anything other than this, what's going to happen tomorrow. So, finding and doing that exercise with your team and talking about your resources and really finding that match is, like I said, it's helpful, and it's actually really it's a morale boost, because there are opportunities often that you can come up with a plan and help the firm and help the employees. So coming up with all that, to communicating that within your company. We can talk more about that, techniques or whatever for the best way to do that. But the last three steps I'll just touch on briefly, which is the third step, is essentially have people help you look at your plan and say, where's the holes? Like, what am I missing? Am I doing the math right? Am I, and whether that's you or, people can call me. I love Mark Cuban put on LinkedIn, like, just post questions, I'll answer them. I think he had like 150,000 questions. I'm no Mark Cuban, but I'm happy to help too. So like, find people that can help you, like, make sure you're strong. Your plan is as strong as it can be.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
I love that. When you talk about the 5-step process, which I'm not familiar with the specific one that you're speaking of, but all the steps feel like the framework that I use plugs in to what you're saying. But poking holes in it, I mean, I'm facilitating the retreats where they're planning out where they're nailing down their plan. But I love that it's a specific step is to poke holes in it, or like find someone to poke holes in it. So I'm curious for you as the owner, do you make a plan? This is a two-part question. First part is, do you have any of your team with you as you're making the plan, or is this you locked in your office cranking numbers and like coming up with your own plan that you're going to present to everyone else? So that's part A. Yeah. And part B is when you get holes poked in it, or that's your attempt, do you take it to do you pay to have holes poked in it, or do you have like mentors that you have look over things? Or so I'm curious how you think about those two things.
Yeah. So the first part is, so the goal is to have as much involvement with your leadership. If you have a leadership team, for sure them, and if you just have broadly a team, but basically the principle is really pulling in people that have unique perspective that can add things. It's not, the point isn't to do with everybody so everybody feels included, but the point is to get the right perspective that you need in the plan. Mm-hmm. And then as a guideline, to not trick yourself or anybody else, meaning the thing I said about at the beginning, as the owner, you have to set sort of the high level goal. So, for example, I didn't ask my leadership team to say, well, what do you think? How much cash do you think we should burn? That's not a question that is theirs to answer. I need to set that, but one that is theirs to answer is, well, we have some tough choices. Do we want to lay off one person, or do we reduce 5 people down to 20% of their hours? That's a very real, like, what do you think's better? What's going to help the team as a whole? So there's questions that when they can choose and really engage and you're open to the outcomes, those are the kind that you get everybody's perspective on.
Okay. That's great. That's really helpful.
And then the second piece around, having people poke holes in it. So, personally, I'm a member of one of the, it's Vistage. It's like young professionals, or there's lots of flavors of it. But I find that invaluable, and for your clients and the people who are listening to this podcast, like if they have something like that, because it's lonely at the top. That's the whole point of those groups, is that you can talk through, here's what I'm thinking. And it's in times like this, boy, it is really, really invaluable. Not everyone can do that or wants to do that. So it really becomes more of, to me, you could pay somebody, but that's tough in these times to want to go do that. But it's, finding the mentors. But if you don't have it, now's the time to go find your way to create that. And it could just be the other person that who runs a business like yours that you knew from law school, calling them up. What are you doing? It doesn't have to be, right. So it does. If you don't have that in place, it's you can just manufacture it with the people that and then even better if you can get sort of a structural thing in place so that they help you, like you do for your your clients, like help them stay on track. So but that's how I do it.
Okay, that's really good to know. I mean, essentially, so you don't pay for someone to poke holes in it, but you invest for yourself to be in Vistage. And a perk of that is that when it comes time and you want some holes poked in your plan, you have a place to go where you can get that.
That's right.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so keep going. That was the
okay.
That was the third thing.
All right. So third step. So step 4 is the shortest of them. So go do it. So work your tail off. Again, there's a huge side benefit here of stress reduction. Like, just get busy. I mean, I'm really not in tongue in cheek. I really think about like getting America back to work. Like, the more we can all keep working, the better this is going to be. So just throw yourself into this plan and keep yourself healthy, exercise, spend time with your family, but just go crank on it. And then the last step is just put a process in place to iterate and review, like what's happened. what's happened on my plan? Am I achieving what I thought I'd achieve? What's happened in the world? Has there been meaningful difference in what we think the outlook looks like right now? And then you iterate on, look at your plan and say, what needs to change? I'm going to add something. I'm going to change something, and then start over. So that's.
Yeah. Do you have a cadence at which you do that, where you kind of step back and look at the processes that you have or the plan that you have, or not necessarily?
I would say in normal times, I do the 90-day rock, set
Yeah.
the big rocks, and then so that is our normal operating process, and then the reality now is it's weekly. Like I try to I don't try, I can't help myself, but on Sundays to think like, what are the weekly rocks? And, how do we, so as I said, like yesterday, I was really pivoting towards, let's look at the growth and like, how can we change who we're going after, how we're going after them, to see what immediate impacts we can have. So it's really more of a weekly now.
Yeah. Okay. That makes so much sense. I wanted to go back. First of all, I should have asked you this before we started. How much time do you have left before I need to let you go?
I have another half hour. So
okay. So when you were talking about taking space to create the plan, like looking ahead, considering where we are right now, there's a ton of uncertainty, but really trying to take control where you do have control and create a plan. One of the things, so I just didn't know if you had anything to say about this, and if you don't, no biggie. But one of the things I think is tough for people, especially when they do have a lot of anxiety, and maybe there's this low level or high level panic because of what's going on. It's hard to focus your brain. Once you're in the mode, you're good. It's almost like lacing up your shoes to go for a run. Once you got your shoes on and you're out for a run, you're just running. You're in it. But it's discipline to get out of that headspace that isn't productive and actually sit down and focus yourself to create the plan. I've talked about this a fair amount the last few episodes in the podcast, and just really trying to provide different ways to think about it and different ways to get yourself into that mode, the productive mode. But do you have anything to say about that, or have you experienced that yourself? Because we're all human. Yeah. It's a natural part of this.
Yeah. Well, I experienced that in spades, and I think my flavor of it is it's really hard for me to not get sucked into the 90-second news cycle, and more so than ever, that I think that's super harmful right now because there's so much planning that has to get done, as opposed to when you're in execution. Anyways, you can sort of get distracted and waste some time looking at news or whatever. But I don't think I have anything earth shattering. I think unplugging yourself literally from your Wi-Fi so that you can just be on your computer and have this, I am going to go through these 5 steps, and force yourself without distraction. So I think, again, from my personal, the way I'm experiencing it, that's my biggest distraction, is wanting to constantly feel like, and I think I rationalize it as like, well, I'm just seeing, trying to plan, so I want to know what the situation is, but doing it more than, we need to all go back to like the 80s or whatever decade when you just had the 5 o'clock news. That's all you need, once a day. So what's the situation? And then I do also like like I said, the thing I like about this 5-step is, it just forces you, this is what I'm going to do. You can do it to whatever degree, whatever degree of rigor you want to do it, but force yourself to go through this. And then it's a way to just hold yourself accountable. If like, I'm going to do this, it's one day, basically. Like everyone has this loosely, and just write it down.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I was going to ask you about, the plan. So just cranking on it. I love that you said that. And I love that you use the words crank on it, because I feel like once you have the plan, for some people, I notice that it's easy to keep going back and refining and tweaking too soon. They haven't executed hard yet. And it's easy to not really know if your plan was as many holes as you probably tried to find in it, it's the only way you're going to know if it was where you land on your plan is if you really give it a go. You really crank on, like, head down work. And there are some people who I talk to that they lift their head too early. Because of anxiety, really. It's like they peek their head up like, oh, it's like checking on themselves. Am I doing okay? Am I doing okay? But it's really too soon. There is that. However, I did notice that you said right now you're lifting your head maybe weekly, just because we're in such a weird phase right now, and we have to be nimble and we have to be agile and be willing to sort of shift and pivot as we are learning new things. And so do you I really like the idea of every week just reflecting a bit on what's going on and see maybe in this phase you do need to lift your head sooner than week to week, Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday, crank hard and execute. But maybe it is time to, lift your head weekly and just get a lay of the land and make sure that you're still driving on the right path as far as you can tell. What do you have to say there? Or, where do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, so I think about it in terms of, typically when you're doing a company plan, it's such a strategic 3 or 5 year, and you're putting these annual plans and quarterlies, and 80% of your focus is more in the strategic and long term, and 20% is sort of dealing with what your reality. And I think the uncertainty that is in play right now basically flips that. I mean, I think you have to put 80% of your planning in the short term, because you don't have enough certainty to make a long-term plan. So that is, therefore, it's rational to, here's my plan. So let me just give you an example. So here's my plan. Tracers needs to connect with attorneys and their problems they're facing right now. So we think we can help people create a home office and work remote. So you can have 2 weeks, 4 weeks of a trial. Just try the tool. See it, because if you're not in the office, or you don't have your paralegal, or you have to let your paralegal go, you can do it yourself. But we think it's a way to help. Again, like, this is my life. I'm having I have huge problems being productive. I lost this tool. So we're going to try that. And it doesn't take long, meaning we're going to get that message out. The sales team will talk with people about, like, is this helpful? And we're really asking our customers and prospects, like, what would be helpful? Like, here's what we have. How can we help you? And you don't need much more than a week to get back on the phone and say, how'd it go? How's, there's a response, there's a metric of a response rate, but there's also just there's a reality to, you just sort of have to talk it out. Like, people are reacting to this. That's not helpful because they need to do this, or it would be if they could do that. So, I think it's appropriate to do, a weekly head up, what's in the discipline to say, I'm going to try this for, particularly as it relates to spending, like, marketing money. I'm going to try this for 4 weeks. And then if it's not, and just tell yourself, what is the bar for success in 4 weeks, so that it's not in 4 weeks you're like, well, it's okay. Did it hit it or not, and move on. So it's really having some rigor in, again, as much as you can take your emotions out of yourself and operate on, I said a rule is this, that's a no, I'm moving on.
That's good. I always say it's either a hell no or a hell yes.
I like that.
There's no in between. But I like yours is more polite. Okay. I had like 3 questions for you in my head, so I'm just getting my thoughts together. One thing I was thinking about as you were talking, just how can I help? Like, what do people need right now? I put something out for attorneys, complimentary, just a bit of a daily accountability to help them stay focused on what they're working on, what they're doing, and being as productive as possible with their time, especially because many of them maybe you too, are in a new environment. They aren't used to working from home. Many of them, they aren't used to having their remote employees.
Right.
And so it's also, not only are they dealing with the stress of just like business, but they also are dealing with natural stress that comes with such a change for their own environment and experience. So I thought, okay, daily accountability, we can just have a check-in in the morning. And I expected the people who signed up to really be hungry for that in a more frantic way or panicked way. Like, yeah, I need to get focused. And what I noticed is everyone who signed up for it is pretty calm and they're just looking to optimize, which is fascinating to me because I thought I was going to be doing a favor to people who were freaking out, and that's just not the case. So, asking what people need, I think I'm still trying to learn. The people who aren't calm, I'm glad to serve the people who are calm. I love optimizing and making sure everything's dialed in, but keep finding ways to serve the community in what they need. Apparently, the daily accountability didn't speak to the people who are freaking out, and I can see them freaking out online, so I know that they're there.
Right.
So I like that, and I think it's useful for attorneys. Also, it's easy for them to cap their thinking and, well, I just do what I do, and I don't know. Like it's easy to not get creative about how to help people or how to, as you were talking about earlier, come up with how can you pivot so that you're offering something that's very adjacent to what you're doing now that makes sense for the time that we're in. And I don't think it's easy for people to get creative and think that way. They've just done this one thing for so long and they're really great at it. And now it's time to think outside the box. And so to bring this full circle with posing that question to yourself or directly to your clients, like, how can I help them with the expertise and knowledge I have now? What is something that is adjacent to what I typically offer and typically provide that is a gray area or a question mark for them at the very least, that I can help clear up or make their lives easier, simpler, better, or provide clarity, I guess. I'm just thinking for attorneys, don't dismiss the opportunity that you have to meet to meet clients where they are, I guess.
Yeah.
I just didn't want people to gloss over that.
Yeah. Well, there's a sort of a double win there, which is, the first obvious one is, it's if everyone connecting in this point in time, it's bonding because it's scary and we're all sort of on the same team. And so that's the first sort of, it's just good in terms of a long-term client relationship. But then you will, if you do that 5 times a day and you just talk with people, it becomes clear to you the answer to that question, or at least you get theories you can test. Boy, I hear people keep saying, I'm worried, whether it's the eviction question or I'm worried about, I'm worried about contracts. I work with businesses, and the other example, which I thought was fascinating, was the force majeure. I don't know how to say that word, but it's the hurricane clause in contracts, and people are already talking about, well, does this count? And so maybe that's the angle, and that's come up twice, and I'm going to help people that have that. So you're also getting educated while you're helping people talk through their own situations. So I think that is a win-win.
And I think too, this is kind of building on what you said, just helping. This phase that we're in, we all need to be helping each other. This is how we're going to get through it as united as possible, is just be willing to help. And I know the business needs to be thought of, and the business does need to survive and or thrive. And so asking these questions isn't just for the business, but for the greater good. How can you freaking help?
Yeah.
If it's not the same way you've always been helping, what is something adjacent that you can offer that's value to the world? And usually that comes with an exchange of money, if you can really provide value to the world. So yeah, I just think that's awesome. Man, thank you for your time today. I feel like you are fun to bat things around with because you're in the trenches with it, with your company. How many team members do you have at your company?
40.
40. Okay. Yeah. So you're in it. And I think that your solution that Tracers offers is something that it just seems to me that people need to be considering if they are focused on growth or efficiency. I don't know why they wouldn't look into it. I just don't. So if you're willing in the future to come back on for conversation around other things, that would be amazing. I value the things that you have to say greatly. And so I appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast and to share about Tracers, but then also your personal experience that you're not just telling our listeners about the framework that you know about. You're not just giving them advice. It's the stuff that you're actually doing and implementing. As hard as it is, this is what's happening inside of Tracers. And I think that's good for people to hear instead of someone just telling them the things that should be done, quote unquote. You're actually doing them. and you have something to say about them because you've had some experience.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoy it. And I view this as I find it helpful because it's another version of poking holes, and here's how I'm thinking about it, and you're thinking about it in different ways. So I find it super helpful too. Would love to anytime.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay. So where can people find you if they want to get connected with Tracers, and or if you are on social media anywhere that you do connect with people?
Yeah, so anybody can just go to tracers.com if anybody wants to try that. Like I said, the 14-day trial, or just basically sign up and say I want the 14-day thing. And then if you want to connect with me, you can do Erik. You can do ericp@tracers.com. Mm-hmm. You can call my cell phone 415-960-4820 if you have a quick business question. Mm-hmm. Or you can go to LinkedIn, and that's really where I do most of my social media stuff. But would love, and I really do mean that. If whatever questions anybody has, it makes me feel good if I can help anybody through this. So I would love to.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Take care.
Hi guys, it's me again. Thanks so much for listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it, and I hope you did, please subscribe so that you get real-time updates whenever we drop a new episode. If you want to continue to hang out with us, come on over to our website and check out how we work with clients. It's our signature 3-phase approach that we use with law firms to achieve growth on their own terms. Head to velocitywork.com/begin for information about those 3 phases and how you might get started if you'd like. Again, that's velocitywork.com/begin. If there's a topic you'd like covered on a future episode, or a question you have, or someone you'd love to have interviewed on the Velocity Work podcast, go to speakpipe.com/velocitywork. Leave us a voice message there. It can be anonymous or not. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to hang out with us on social, come on over to Instagram. Our handle is velocity.work. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/meetvelocitywork. Cheers, my friends, to real growth and a great life. Bye, guys. Show notes from this episode can be found at velocitywork.com/podcast.